and welcome to today's episode of Decoding Growth. In this series, we bring to you industry experts who share with us their thoughts and perspectives on what are the factors which have driven the growth of our market. Today, I have with me brand guru Harish Bijoor. Harish and I have been friends, colleagues, even neighbors, and currently both faculty at the Indian School of Business. Harish happens to have had a ringside view of a vast array of brands operating in India. So let's use this opportunity to get his insights as to how can branding help in terms of delivering business growth. Harish, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Prakash. My pleasure being here. I've known you for decades, and we've literally grown up together, started our careers together, and I think we've ended up together on a teaching platform and a learning platform. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. Harish, amongst the vast multitude of brands that you have handled, which is the one which strikes out as the one which you really feel engaged with?
Well, I'm a huge coffee lover. Okay, and my love for coffee started at the company we started, which is Brook Bond Lipton India Limited, and then grew into Tata Coffee, and then moved on. So one of my favorite brands in this country is a brand which is in trouble today, and the brand is Cafe Coffee Day. If you really ask me, it started from scratch. It started as a dream. It was nurtured beautifully, came to a solid stage, and got stuck. And I think, that remains to be a popular brand with young people all over, young people who've grown up over the last 20 years, sipping a cup of coffee and imagining that a lot can happen over coffee. And I think, the moment you are able to strike a lingo, be a part of the common lexicon of consumers, I think you have arrived. And that's exactly what Cafe Coffee Day has done.
It's a great brand to start with, Harish. And also the fact that Cafe Coffee Day, especially for folks like us who grew up with the Nescafe and the brew era, really stuck a deep chord. But what you also brought out is a very interesting idea, which is it could be a great brand, but if the brand is in trouble, does it really qualify as a great brand?
Sure. That's an interesting point. If you look at it, my definition of a brand, Prakash, is a simple one. I demystify brands. I tend to say a brand is a thought that lives in a person's mind, full stop. Then people ask me, and? I say, and nothing more, nothing less. A brand is a thought that lives in people's minds. And that's why it's complex, because as many people, that many thoughts of that same brand. So let's come to a brand called Cafe Coffee Day, let's say. This thought was planted in millions of people's minds. This thought became a part of the chemistry of consumption of coffee in this country. Over a period of time, it grew. It hit as many as 2,340 outlets in this country, promoted by VG Siddhartha, who used to be a very passionate man, and he was a passionate man. And, he took it to this level. But other things happened. So the point in answer is simply this. You can have a great brand label. You can create a great brand label. But the great brand label needs to have a business backbone behind it. And that business backbone needs to be able to survive, nurture, and sustain over a period of time. If that backbone goes, nothing terrible happens to the brand, really, because the brand label survives. Look at a brand called Paulson's Butter in this country. It's a dead brand. You and I weren't even born maybe when the Paulson's Butter was big, but we've heard tales and tales of it. Even today, if somebody is able to buy the brand label and recreate Paulson's Butter, there is a residue of affection for that brand, and it can run once again. So brand labels different, businesses different. The two need to marry. And the two need to go in sync with one another. Great brands are ones which create great brand labels and great business backbones, both going together.
If I would say my difference in opinion of that would be mostly in agreement, but where you attributed brand to the label and you kept business separately, And the way I look at it, a brand is a combination of the label, the tag, the emotion which you highlighted, which could be different for different people, and the tag need not be. But take a brand like Google, which can have different tags for different
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
but the emotion is more or less the same.
Yeah.
But the most important part of the brand, which we tend to forget, is what it does. And that's where the business comes in.
I agree with you. If you really look at a brand, I would still split it into two. You know, I was in Berlin recently speaking to a bunch of professors who were really talking about branding. I was speaking in English and I was talking, and they asked me, what is a brand? And I said, my favorite definition, the brand is a thought that lives in people's mind. Then a prof raises a hand and says, Prof, can you use a Sanskrit word to describe a brand? Now, Germany is the capital of Sanskrit. A larger number of Sanskrit scholars in Germany than in India.
Maybe in India.
Yeah. And what really happens is she says this. And when she says this, I scratch my head, stand on my feet, think on my feet, as I normally do. And I said, ma'am, brand is Maya. Maya. What is Maya? Maya is here and Maya isn't here. Maya is a thought. So I still insist that a brand label is a different item and a business is a different item. The twain need to meet. The twain need to go together. But at times, the twain can separate and someone else could pick up that brand label and run with it. So if you look at it, Maya is a thought and Maya is a meta thought. And Maya is really, if there is a physicality, which is a business. Whereas the metaphysicality, which is the brand. Metaphysical brands walk hand in hand with physical businesses. Physical businesses are very important because they sustain the future. But when the twain parts, I'm still insistent. And I say that a metaphysical brand can move on its own and a business can move on its own. Examples, I think we are going to wait to see those examples happen because brand revival needs to happen. And therefore, I'm very excited about the metaphysicality of a brand, the Maya of a brand, ISB, the brand. I mean, it's not the studio, this beautiful studio. It's not this beautiful campus. It's not any one person. It's not the faculty. It's much beyond. Because it is that chemistry of the brand ISB that's been created over 23 years, and this mix is eclectic. The moment people think of ISB, there are a set of thoughts that come to their mind. And ISB is just that, those set of thoughts. Well, the business, that's a separate aspect. So I still cleave the two.
Okay, so we'll cap it at that, but the physicality of the business, as you called out, the metaphysicality of Maya, and the physicality of the label. And therefore, the fact that labels change.
Yes.
And the brand still remains.
Yes.
Creating more or less the same emotion. Very often, we find, the recent case in point being Air India.
Yeah.
Okay, they've changed the label.
Yeah.
But what they perhaps need to change is more of the emotion.
Yeah.
And there's a jump in belief that the change of label will lead to a change of emotion.
Sure. Air India is a classic example. I think, if you really look at it, it's gone through a history of its own. J.R.D. Tata, then Air India, and Air India, the pride of India, and an airline of a gold or platinum standard in those days, then getting into public sector holding, and then going down the chute. And then once again, a homecoming of the brand. And this time round, it's not only Air India, but it's the old Indian Airlines, it's maybe Air India Express. I mean, literally all of them getting together, merging to becoming a behemoth, Vistara included. Now, this is a very difficult thing to do because please note, the label is beautiful because no other airline can have India in its name in the dominant manner in which Air India has it. And that's exactly what they've done in this repositioning. They've really looked at center staging it, a unique font, and the aircraft belly also bearing it, significantly. But the point you make is absolutely bang on in the sense that if you do not create the chemistry of the brand within the new brand name, you are going to flounder. And that is going to be a very difficult exercise. Now, how do you create chemistry? In a very service touch industry like the aviation industry, it's very important that every touch functions beautifully. In an airline, from the point of thinking of getting onto an aircraft and actually exiting the other airport out, there are 14 brand touches. If each of these 14 brand touches go beautifully, the brand is a click. But even if one goes out of sync, the brand is a disaster.
And in a service industry,
Can you imagine?
where you don't have that level of control.
Yep.
Yep.
And that is the worry, and that is the problem. And that's where I would very clearly say Air India must brand itself after it has corrected its service mechanisms, its delivery mechanisms, its experience mechanisms. Because the brand is service, a brand is delivery, a brand is experience. All three of it put together.
And this is almost a perennial mistake which you see organizations make. They believe branding is about the label, the tagline, or even the new jingle which they might create. Coming to Air India, for example, taking your thought of the emotion, if there's one common emotion about Air India, for me that would be, this is the airline which brings you back home.
Absolutely.
If you look at it through every disaster, natural, political, economic, that's the airline which goes and brings people home. And even today, the bulk of the people who fly from abroad are the ones who are coming in for a home visit.
Absolutely.
Why would you not continue to find out that one common theme rather than try to be one more airline? Yeah. But anyway, don't we see brands always fall into this trap again and again and again?
Yes, brands make these mistakes. And why do brands make these mistakes? I'm going back to those the early thought that we discussed of the metaphysicality of a brand, which is the brand name, its identity, its chemistry, and everything it represents, and the physicality of the brand. Now, the physicality of the brand is the business, and the business needs to run, and the business needs to run profitably, and businesses have their own challenges. Most of the time, companies tend to say that this physicality of the brand is more important than the metaphysicality of the brands. Fundamentally, because most people don't understand this metaphysicality of the brand. Most people don't respect it enough. Businesses are respected because this is where the money flows in from. This is a revenue creating mechanism which is clearly identified. But the supra-revenue creating ability of the brand metaphysicality is never understood by business managers and sadly even CEOs. CEOs make mistakes. All CEOs are human beings and they make mistakes. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that brands make. I think needs to be corrected. Brands need to regain the kind of respect that they deserve. They don't get it. Fundamentally because lots of people don't understand brands. It's an easy word to tout. It's an easy name to wear on your sleeve. It's an easy name to throw. But understanding brands, I think few people do. And that's very important as a trait to have within the DNA of a business organization. I think Air India needs it as well.
Yep. Okay, let's move away from Cafe Coffee Day and Air India. Let's talk about your three most aspirational brands to emulate.
Okay. Even before I come to that, I would just say the two brands we discussed, both of them are red and white, if you really look at it. I mean, there's something in the color red and something in the color of a brand I used to handle called Red Label, which is still my favorite old brand.
Oh, it's one of my favorite
yeah,
also.
There you
we
are.
worked on that. Yeah.
So you and I, such common connect on it. If you look at it, Red Label remains my favorite brand. A lot of people will say, hey, Red Label, one of those cheaper teas in the market. Okay, not really one of those high-priced ones. I've handled better brands. I've handled Taj Mahal, which used to be a superior one. I've handled inferior brands, which is Super Dust, which used to be, bottom of the market. I've even
supremely bottom
of the market. I've handled a brand called SHB, a special hotel blend. Okay, and another brand called Gulab. Can you imagine? I mean, these were true blue, great Indian brands.
Come on, I've handled
Dalda. There you go. There you go. And Dalda is such a killer brand.
Yeah.
And that's what I wonder at times, from Dalda to Intel. I mean, that was a recreation of Prakash Bagri in such a different manner. But let me come back to your question. The top three brands, I would definitely say Red Label still remains my brand, my favorite brand. And crazily, you will hit me for this, but Fair and Lovely. Okay. A politically incorrect brand today to talk about.
Totally politically incorrect.
But one brand that made India actually buy it, a brand that has monetized itself to a humongous level, and a brand which is recalled in the remotest corner of India. You know, I divide India into four: urban India, rural India, and deep rural India. I work a fair bit in deep rural India. I've just come out from a market called Chetal in Gujarat, you know, in the Amreli Taluka. Every home that I went, I just asked one single question because I don't only visit shops as we normally do. You get into homes, and I went into about 26 homes, asked them one brand that you remember, and guess what? They told me about Gulab Besan, which is a Gujarati snack item, which besan goes into creating
Almost
delicious
everything
Gujarati
in
snacks.
Gujarat.
Almost everything. My mouth waters as of
Yeah.
now. But the point is, they one brand name, and I was hoping Red Label would come up big
Not in
way.
Gujarat.
But sadly, no, absolutely no. 2 out of those 26 homes said Red Label. But then every one of them, 25 out of 26, and that's a humongous number, talked about Fair and Lovely. Okay, and I happen to be sitting on brand Fair and Lovely for a period of time, in those politically incorrect days. So one has done good, one has done bad, but then one has learned, one self-actualizes at a point of time. Yeah.
Yeah, and Fair and Lovely was a very interesting brand, all said and done, because I have obviously seen many more men surreptitiously walk into a store looking for Fair and Lovely. It's a different matter that it took an imami to figure that out and come up with Fair and Handsome. But let's move. Okay, so Red Label, Pehla Pyar. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Globally?
It certainly is my first love. If I look at anything globally, I mean, I somehow have to come back to your brand called Intel. Okay.
Okay.
Because, if you really look at B2B and if you really look at what somebody can create, it was created beautifully. And you were one of the guys who spearheaded it out here. If you look at it, Intel Inside, it's such a simple line. Even today, it is quoted. We have written papers on it, and everybody has really discussed it to death to say, how can this being be created out of nothingness? And of course, this business of, we're starting from Pentium 1, 2, 3, Celeron, etc. Each one of those pieces of branding that we talk about, every piece piggybacked on that Intel Inside thing. And today, anybody who thinks of B2B quotes it off the cuff.
Glad that you brought up Intel. That's something which always kind of worries me when people quote it off the cuff and they say, I'm an ingredient brand and I also want to be like Intel.
Yeah, yeah.
And the one thing I have to say, first of all, hang on. This is not a brand manager decision.
Yeah.
This is not even a CMO decision. This is a board level decision because the kind of investment it takes to create a brand like Intel is not, it's not a quarterly campaign.
Absolutely.
So I would rather advise you don't even get into it.
Yeah.
If you get your CEO and your chairman agreeing, then it's certainly worth consideration whether you'll go down that path. Okay, let's move from this whole concept of branding and get a bit more specific, not that we haven't been. And let me give you a bit background as to where I'm hitting at right now. Over the last 20 years, and maybe because of the Intel days when we were number 5 in the world's most valuable brands, I used to regularly follow and still do the most valuable brands in the world. And it's been an interesting study. You see how the technology brands have taken over, how platform brands have taken over. Over the last couple of years, again, while we have been through this entire COVID, you're seeing the luxury brands taking over. Yeah. The fact that we are in a period of uncertainty, Accenture finds its way into the list of top 100 brands. But what really strikes me, I might even say rankles a bit, is that I ain't found an Indian brand anywhere close to making it to that list.
Yeah.
Why do you think we are missing?
Okay. That's a sharp one. That's a very sharp question. It hurts. It hurts all of us. But it's a truth. Now, if you really look at the global brands listing, the top 100 even if we do figure we come in as company name brands, maybe it could be a Tata, it could be a group.
A Reliance or a Tata, now Adani.
Etc. And the Adani group, if you look at it. The problem lies in the fact that, no product brand or a service brand has actually made it there from our side. See, product brands, it's easier to make it out there. But then, the product brand dimension certainly has service and experience attached to it umbilically. And therefore, very few brands have invested enough in the nation's context to say that, hey, I have a product brand, and this product brand is a solid brand, okay? And this is a toothpaste that is made only in India. Let's take any brand. Let me also invest into the experiential pieces that actually go into the see, touch, feel piece of it, and let me invest it with a long-term vision in mind. Most brands don't have a purpose. And purpose is it at the end of the day, because we have always been stuck. Indian brands have been stuck at the level of target. We all need targets. Okay, vision, mission, full stop. The glass ceiling comes on mission. But purpose, I think, purpose is breaking that glass ceiling of mission and vision and actually hitting the purpose, goal. And now, since brands haven't attempted that, I think there is a lack of foresight into 100 years. Indian brands think 20 years. Global brands think 500 years. So if you look at a brand called Dove, Dove has a 400-year-old kind of a platform of forward-lookingness, if you look at it. Yeah. And it's not by hindsight, because, I've actually gone and looked at the guard books of Dove.
1990s is when they made the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So each one of these are beautifully encapsulated. Take a look at Apple. Apple is a global best, if you really look at it. And I think Apple has smashed that ceiling. Has gone beyond it. Apple is not a product, it's a super brand to the extent that, you can actually buy one.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life. It's a way of life. And I kind of wonder why we are not able to create a way of life brand, to pick your phrase, in India. And actually, if you look at India, India is a very ancient country. Okay, let me talk Hinduism. If you really look at 79% of the population of this country is Hindu. If you look at the Hindu population out there, you say Hinduism is about Sanatana Dharma. And you also say Hinduism is not a religion, it's a way of life. Picking that phrase out and saying that, hey, listen, a way of life. Why is it that in our country we have not been able to build a way of life brand? It's in our DNA. It's in our deep DNA. It's into our history. It's into our culture. We haven't been able to do that. But
Steve Jobs could come over here, spend time, pick up the way of life and transfer it into the brand.
He's taken our apple and bitten into it. Okay. If you look at it, how can we attempt doing it? Actually, we have properties. We have products which have gone global. Yoga, for instance, TM, for instance, many of our Maharishis and our gurus have gone. Basmati as a concept. These have all gone crazy. But, yoga, for instance, has got hijacked by the world. Every piece of yoga that sells does not, repatriate money back into the country in any way, if you look at it. And the number of countries, 118 countries monetizing yoga, much bigger than India monetizes. India is the 119th country in the world which monetizes yoga, okay, out of a list of 206 countries, let's say. So it's really sad. So I think, we have not thought branding enough. And I think thinking more branding is an imperative for Indian companies to go out there. Even services companies, we tend to say an Infosys, a Cognizant, a TCS are brands, global brands, but not really. Yeah. They're globally used brands, but they're not global brands. Now, what must we concentrate on? I think we must concentrate on this epic thing called experiences. What is the experience that your brand actually creates? And we must also, think a little bit more macro when it comes to brands. We think too micro. So the macro thought is, can India produce that one purpose-led brand which becomes the killer world brand for the future? The one brand that goes beyond product, beyond service, beyond even experience, and can we create something like that? Now, that's a deep task to attempt. Must we attempt it? I think we should attempt it. Does India have the story to tell? I think we have got millions of stories to tell. India is a nation of stories, and we can weave so much. God's own country was a story woven at a point of time. And every story that we tell beautifully, every story that every global person can resonate with is going to make an impact. And I think today that's exactly what Apple does. Apple is a storytelling brand. I mean,
Where it stopped telling its own stories,
yeah,
other tell it for it.
others are telling. Harley Davidson is a classic example where the hogs are telling you the stories.
Yeah.
So I think, and Harley Davidson, the moment you think, you get goose flesh at times, there are brands. Can India create that one brand that can create goose flesh, goose pimples in people to really say that, hey, I need to be there, I need to want it? Can India be that in itself is a thought we must explore as well.
What do you think is the essence of brand India? So why are you even looking for that one way
Yeah.
of picturizing India?
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Why is it that we want to translate a brand like India into a tagline?